Hey everyone! Today on the plastic canvas we're painting the workers from Zombicide Invader by Simon Games. Hey everyone, Matt here from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to episode 2 of this Zombicide Invader series. Today we're painting the workers. These are the cannon fodder, the main enemies that you'll be facing in this sci-fi version of Zombicide. Now just quickly, I do want to apologise for my voice. I have just gotten over a chest infection, but my voice is still a little bit shaky. But I did still want to get this video up for you guys to watch, so I do apologise for my voice, but hopefully it'll hold out for the video. So I'm starting this series off with the workers because these guys make up about half of the minis for the entire game. At a quick look and a quick calculate, I reckon there's about 70 minis in the whole game, and I reckon about 35 of them are these workers. So because these guys make up half of the game, I want to try and find the most efficient way possible to get these guys painted while still meeting, a good enough standard that these guys can go out on the table. Because being about 35 or so of these, if I spend, say, an hour on each one, there's 35 hours on just half the game. And I don't have 35 hours to spend on half of this game. Even half an hour on each of them, it's still going to be 17 or 18 hours on these guys. I really don't have that much time either. I don't really want to spend that much time on it either. So yeah, looking for the most efficient ways that I can get these guys painted while still meeting a good enough standard for them to go out onto the table. So while this video is playing, that'll be a good thing to keep in mind. I'm not going for a super high quality with these. If you do want to see some pictures of these painted to a really high standard, check out the Kickstarter page on Facebook for this game. There are some really well painted minis on there. But yeah, so this is just going to be a bit of a speed paint, to try and knock these guys over pretty quick. So as usual, my starting point was to do a Zenithal Prime. Now the reason I did a Zenithal Prime with these guys is because I knew I was going to be using my airbrush for most of the steps. And the airbrush just naturally puts paint down thinner than using a brush. And so when painting over the Zenithal Prime, the tones from that just come through a lot easier than when using a brush. So the Zenithal Prime was put down, so that when that first layer of the skin went down, the tones from the Prime still came through, and it gave me some free highlighting and shading so that I was able to minimize that highlighting and shading step down the track and save a little bit of time that way. So then I laid down the first skin tone, and that was just a mix of grey and I think the bone colour. And that covered a little bit more of the prime than what I hoped it would. I tried to be really as thin and careful with it as possible, especially over the darker spots of the prime. Still covered it a bit more than what I wanted to, but it was okay. The tone still did come through a bit, so I did manage to get some advantage from the prime that I put down. So then it was on to using the colours to build up those shades, up the arms, over the shoulders, and up the legs. And this is the first time that I've used the airbrush in this way to try and get some blends. In the past, really the only two ways that I've used my airbrush has been for priming and for laying down a solid colour for an initial base coat if a mini was one predominant colour. So say with the minions from Arcadia Quest Inferno, they have red skin and then bits of armour here and there. So the first step was just to paint them all red, and then with my brush then pick out the other details. So doing these blends is the first time that I've used my airbrush for this, and I was really happy with how this came up and how easy I found it to actually get those blends. So because the skin tone was a light grey, the first shade of the blue you may have noticed was not just a straight blue. I mixed a bit of grey in with it, and that's so that when as I painted up the arms and then across the shoulders, where the edge of the cone of the airbrush sort of finished, and then it feathered out back to the skin tone, because that blue had some grey in it, that really helped the blue that I put down to blend into the skin tone because of the grey that was in both colours. So then what I did next was I then used Brilliant Blue, which is my darkest blue, just that with no grey mixed in at all, to work from the feet, just to feather then into that initial blue that I put down. And then I also did that from the hands up the arms as well. Now initially I was only going to use it on the legs because I wanted to darken the bottom of the Mini so that the top would then appear lighter, and then that would naturally draw people's attention. That's not a bad process to follow, just to control where people look at a Mini, especially for speed painting. But I really liked the blend that I got and the way that it looked, and just the extra depth that it added. So I then went and did it on the arms as well, and just feathered that up to kind of near the shoulders, just so that it gave a bit of an extra gradient. And then using, I think it was Heraldic Red, that's what I used for the hands up to the forearms. And again, no grey mixed in with that, just the straight red. And yeah, that just created a nice gradient from the red through to the blue, which then went up into that bluey grey that I'd mixed up, and that feathered out nicely into the skin tone. And from there, I then went back to building the grey back up on the chest and stomach and back of these guys, because I did get a bit too much of an overspray from when I did the arms and the shoulders and that, and I covered up a bit more of the skin than what I initially intended to. So yeah, I went back to like the base coat that I mixed up, painted that back over the chest and stomach and the back to build the grey back up, and then I did some highlighting. Now that's the main step in these 5 guys that I've done, because I have here one of each sculpt that's in the game. This is really the main step in this one that I will not do when I come to paint the rest of them, and that's because it was just too much of a time suck for the actual benefit that it gave at the end, because I do put a very, very thin down black wash over the whole Mini except for the head. That's just to add to the depth and contrast, because there is a little bit of texture here and there. So what I will be doing when I paint the rest of them is just remixing that skin tone, putting it in the airbrush, and then just hitting the back and the chest and stomach, just to quickly redo that, and then maybe using a lighter tone of that to then just kind of just hit maybe from a bit of a higher sort of angle, just to pick out some highlights, and that'd be it. And then across, the other 30 or so of these, that'll save a good couple of minutes with each one, because yeah, there was a couple of minutes in doing that, bringing that skin tone back up on the chest and stomach and back, and highlighting as well, and yeah, it just wasn't worth doing it with the brush. So that'll be one thing that I will change. I will do that with the airbrush. Now here I'm painting the tentacles. Initially I just painted the ones that were kind of around the chest and just on top of the shoulders, because following the artwork that looked to be all of the ones that had some colour to them within the artwork, but I didn't really like the way that it looked. I thought it looked unfinished. So now I'm going back and just painting the ones on the back of the head as well. So if you weren't able to pick up what I was doing there, initially I laid down the Twilight Purple, which is my darker purple, and then just with very, very watered down bristles, I then just feathered that purple out so that it blended into the bone color of the head, just to give a bit of a transition, so that it just looked like that purple from the tentacles kind of blended into the head, and those tones sort of matched there. And then using the Amethyst Purple, which is my brighter purple, I then just picked out the top of each of those tentacles, just to kind of a bit of a highlight, but also in the artwork it looks like they have a bit of a glow to them. So I wasn't necessarily trying to paint them to look like they had a glow, but just painting that thinner purple line and then letting that darker purple kind of show up behind, just help to sort of just lift them a little bit, give them a bit of extra depth, and yeah, I think they've sort of finished them off well. So then once all of that was done, the main last thing that I did besides, painting the eyes and things like that was to do a very, very thin down Nuln Oil wash over the whole body except for the head. That was just so that it would fall into all of the recesses and just build a bit of depth and pick at some of the textures without me having to go through and actually doing like shading with the brush. So it was important that it was very, very thin down because I didn't want it to take away from the blue and the red tones that I'd built up there, and I didn't want to turn it like black. I just simply wanted it to fall into those recesses and just highlight some of those details a little bit. So I just thinned it down with water. I know you can use something like Lamium Medium, which I don't have any of. It's something that I do want to get. But yeah, I think that was an important step to do, but very, very important that it was thin so that it didn't take away from the colors that I had built up. So now I'm just doing some really, really simple basing to finish it off. You'll see I use the Sterling Mud just to create a sort of a textured finish. Put a couple of little rocks in there, and now I've just mixed up some red and orange to create a sort of a Marsy kind of tone to match the outside tiles in the game. And then the brown there is just to paint the rocks. Then I chuck a Agrax Earthshade wash over it just to add a bit of depth. And then I finish it with a Riser Rust dry brush. Just to pick out some of those raised surfaces. Yeah, it's basically just to match the outside tiles, and yeah, just so it kind of looks like, yeah, like a bit of a sort of Mars kind of surface. So with these last couple of steps being done on the base of the workers, these guys are finished. So thank you very, very much for, first of all, putting up with my voice. It just has managed to hold in there, but also spending some time watching me paint some more minis. I didn't mention it back at the start of the game, but even though there are about 35 or so of these guys, there are 5 different sculpts of them, and that's the 5 that I've done here, just so that I can test these little techniques and processes on each of them, and then you can sort of see what each of them end up looking like. So I really hope you've gotten something out of this video, something that you can take away and use in your own painting, especially if you're going to be painting these guys, or you've just simply enjoyed watching me paint. Please leave a comment down below, something that you like about the video, something that you think can be improved so I can keep making these videos as good as possible. And please do stop by the Facebook, Twitter and Instagram accounts that I've set up for this channel, especially Instagram. That's where I'm most active. And yeah, please do like and subscribe to keep up to date with these videos as they'll keep coming out. There will be plenty more Zombicide coming out, as well as some other games as well that we have kickstarted. So with all that being said, this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.